Hillary has been lengthening her excuses as to why she lost the election. She didn't really lose the election. It was stolen from her by, I think it's up to 24 different excuses she has now. Number 24 is content farms in Macedonia. And as I said, my grandfather was a Macedonian content farmer, and we often think about, gathering on the porch and recalling the old days on the Macedonian. He never thought that the old content farmers he left behind in Macedonia would one day steal the U.S. presidential election. They are gnarled, hard-working Macedonian peasants, and the way they were able to reach out and steal the election.
As news this week emerged that Zoran Zaev, the ostensible Prime Minister of Macedonia, has essentially given in to all of Bulgaria's ridiculous demands, Macedonians in Macedonia and around the world exploded in righteous anger. Branko Crvenkovski, the former Prime Minister, President, and head of the Citizen Party, essentially the Pope of the left in Macedonia, called for Zaev's resignation, as did many others in his party, some openly, some through thinly veiled statements. Macedonians from all parties, ethnicities, backgrounds, and classes also called Zaev out and began demonstrations throughout Macedonia and around the world wherever Macedonians live. In neighboring Bulgaria, the defense minister of Bulgaria, the entirely loathsome Krasimir Karakachanov, again publicly taunted Zaev, stating, quote, "In the old Bulgarian custom, the Bulgarian's brain runs a day late. It is so with our colleague Zaev," unquote. How did Zaev respond to this? Lamely. He attempted to defend himself on Twitter and Facebook, of course, as a Macedonian who speaks Macedonian, but then felt the need to add that he works to reconcile views on differences and knows that it is only possible through an exchange of ideas and opinions and not through insults and inappropriate message or hate speech. What Zaev fails to realize, however, is that he is dealing with a bully in the form of the Bulgarian government. And a bully can never be placated through, quote, an exchange of ideas and opinions, unquote, but only by not giving in to the bully and by pushing back, by fighting that bully. Then again, Zaev, like many of his supporters among the elites in the West, is a utopian, which means literally, quote, no place, unquote. Zaev lives in a fairy tale land that does not exist, and because of that, he should not be prime minister. We'll discuss all of this and more on this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona.
And this is Cvetin Shalimanov calling in from Skopje, Macedonia.
Good morning to you, or I should say good afternoon to you, since we are recording this on Tuesday, the very first day of December 2020, the last month of this dumpster fire year.
Yeah. Wait, there's still time for it to do something spectacular.
That's true. But, having said that, though, there have been many good things that have happened in this year as well. So I think it's important. As we enter this season of hope, the Christmas season, first here and then there in early January, it's important to realize, I think, that there needs to be gratitude in spite of all the hardships that we go through, including the one that Macedonia is yet again going through right now with all of this crap that Zoran Zaev and his foreign minister, what's his name? Buyarosmani. Forgot it already. It's easy. Nikola Dimitrov, the former foreign minister, and others are throwing on Macedonia. So as we record this, there are literally, I think today, Tuesday, you tell me, there's demonstrations daily now throughout Macedonia?
Yeah. Practically. I think they just skipped one day since Zaev's interview.
Yeah, in front of the government. I see that our friend Antonio Milishevsky, the former foreign minister, was leading protests today. Now, and as I understand it as well, he has asked for, because he's on the Foreign Affairs Committee, he's asked for both Osmani and Dimitrov to show up and explain what's going on. I think that's a reasonable request from the opposition to, since you would think that a government that is attempting to negotiate away its people's identity and language and everything else, history and everything else that goes with it, you would think it would be a reasonable request for the members of the government party that are trying to do this to, show up and explain to the opposition and to the people of Macedonia why they are doing this. But Bujar Osmani and Nikola Dimitrov, have refused this request, I think, 2 or 3 times already.
Yeah, 2 hearings. Now they want to allow holding a session of the committee where, at one point Miloševski brought like a cardboard
I saw
effigy of
that.
Nikola Dimitrov with a mask over his mouth, and he debated him in this way since Dimitrov
Excellent.
wouldn't come in person. Dimitrov said, okay, we can do it initially, we can do it online, but apparently he's refusing to do even this because, something would have been arranged by now. Yeah, it's really bad. I mean, Bulgaria apparently won't give any room to Zaev or any of his proxies to claim something like we got something out of this. No, it's going to be like a complete demand for surrender. And, most interestingly, as we discussed, most ironically and hilariously, even on issues which these people now care about. They didn't care about
Right.
Alexander. They didn't care about, all the ancient era kings or the fact that, drawing our anchorage of Macedonian legitimacy and statehood from the ancient times. The left didn't care about the period of the first Slavic states and also of any heritage from Byzantium, the Christian, baptism period, and the spread of Christianity, or the national enlightenment period. They especially didn't care about the Vimera period of national
Oh,
liberation struggle in
right.
the 19th, 20th century. All they cared about is the Second World War, and now the Bulgarians are coming precisely for this, and they're asking for Tito on the silver platter, and they're extremely butthurt.
Right. Yeah. That is the funniest thing when they,
Yeah.
they, oh, what's the, I can't remember the old joke, but anyway, yeah, they came for
Yeah, I did that.
Alexander, and they came for Alexander, and I said,
Yeah.
no, 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 I can't, I'm too busy. They came for,
No, they were
uh,
actually throwing paintballs on Alexander's monument. They were
that's
actually,
true.
no, take it, please come, take it.
Yeah.
We'll lead you to it. We'll
Yeah.
open the gates to the city to grab the statue.
Oh, yeah. Oh dear. Well, and now to back up just a bit to your point about Bulgaria, it's a curious thing, and I leave it to folks that study Bulgaria and know this infinitely more than I certainly do, an American living in the deserts of the southwestern Arizona. Bulgaria knows that it's getting criticized, at least openly. Maybe behind the scenes they're being encouraged by the EU. I don't know, or NATO, or both. But they know they're getting slammed publicly for this, more or less, not always. Angela Merkel's statements notwithstanding, and either maybe they really think that Zaev, having seen that he gave in completely to Greece
Yeah,
and the
of
way he
course.
did it, maybe that's just their calculation, that they believe that eventually he will, quote unquote, triumph and be able to ram all this through, because this will require a new treaty or an annex to the, quote unquote, friendship agreement or something in writing is what the Bulgarians are
Yeah.
going to demand. And they just simply believe that Zaev will be able to deliver that. Now, having said that, I guess, again, we're recording this on Tuesday, December 1. Yesterday, the EU ambassadors agreed that both Macedonia and Albania cannot begin negotiations. Albania for different reasons. So Germany, which is what is the official title, the rotating presidency of the EU? Sort
Yeah,
of
something
the,
like
the
presidency of the European
council.
Council.
Yeah, European Council, right. So they ain't going to get squat. So the baton, so to speak, gets handed over to Portugal and Slovenia next in January. Both at the same time, or one and then the other? I can't remember.
No, no, each gets 6 months. I think first it's
That's
Portugal,
right.
then
Yeah.
Slovenia, but they're like, I mean, they're happy if they manage to hold like the meetings and nobody gets terribly sick with COVID or anything like that. They're
Right.
just happy to host the thing, nothing more.
Right. So the
Can't
Portuguese
expect them to
are
do
up.
anything.
Yeah, to use a baseball term, the Portuguese are first up at bat and get to swing and strike out probably like everybody else before
I
them.
wouldn't care.
Yeah, but then now the other wrinkle, of course, in this is that there is a call by the opposition, Vomarodopamene, to for a no confidence vote, It looks like some of the opposition ethnic Albanian parties of Macedonia are also agreeing with them. Of course,
Yeah.
they hate Dewey for other reasons. Go ahead.
Maybe the main news item of the week, and what's it been, like 10 days since the last podcast, more than a week, I think, is that Zaev in the meantime had this interview for the Baganes
Yes.
news agency in Bulgaria, in which, there was this funny looking Bulgarian journalist interviewing Zaev. Zaev in some areas had no idea what he's talking about, obviously, and in some areas he was apparently coached to give away the family farm and then some. So basically all the demands made by Bulgaria, he agreed to them. So the Bulgarian journalist asks, okay, you insist that we're a fascist country in World War II. Zaev says, no, we can't ascribe the word fascism to an entire country, which is okay, correct, but then the country needs to condemn its own role in the Second World War. That's the norm. I mean, that's the bare minimum.
The Germans certainly have done that.
Yeah, it's and Zaev says, no, let's say it was more like an administration, not occupation. And then Bulgaria liberated Skopje, which, has begun exploding on the left here, because Bulgaria was obviously part of the Axis at the initial, for most of the war. It didn't join in the war against the USSR, but it did help against Yugoslavia, and obviously got Macedonia, parts of Greece, and parts of Serbia in exchange. And then as the Russian troops came into Bulgaria, they switched sides, obviously. They declared a new government, which was then quickly also replaced, and a communist government was installed. And then they turned their armies, and as the Germans were fleeing the region, I mean, this is the great claim to victory of the Macedonian partisans as well, that we liberated the cities. It was like November 1944. The Germans were losing at the main front. They were fleeing the region. And, there was a scramble who gets to capture which part of real estate first. And the Bulgarian intact armies, for not participating in any actual serious fighting, they crossed over the border, marched to Kumanova, took some part in pushing out the small garrison in Skopje, which was just guarding the railway, to draw all their weaponry from Greece and Macedonia and etc. north. And then they were told to leave the country because it's going to practically go back to being under Serbia in Yugoslavia, and the Bulgarians, as a defeated party in the war, said, okay, fine, we can't, claim this territory, which we won as Hitler's allies, makes sense. So Zaev says, okay, you're not fascists, you were liberators. And then he says, I speak in my Strumica, I speak a language which is indistinguishable from what they speak in Petric, across the border in Pirin, Macedonia and Bulgaria. So what language is it? So he did not say it's Macedonian, what they speak in Petric. He implied that, okay, we speak Bulgarian in Strumica, because of the overall tone of the interview. It was implied, it was not said, but it's very clear that he implied that we are the same nation. So then he says that Yugoslavia was a dictatorship, that it discriminated against many people, including Bulgarians, which is true, but again, lefty heads exploding here. And then he said that, from my point of view, we lost everything worth, keeping so far, especially in the negotiations with the Greeks. This is now all the losses are now accumulated on the side of the leftists here, which, as we said, gleefully, happily accepted all earlier concessions to Greece. So now they're getting a very strong dose of their own medicine. And then Zaev says, we are going to, the Bulgarian journalist asks for, and Zaev agrees, that we're going to use hate speech laws to go after people who use negative propaganda against Bulgaria, meaning if somebody mentions that Bulgaria was sided with the fascists, and ergo it was part of the fascist axis, and it was fascist at least for this period of time, blah, blah, blah. He didn't mention the Holocaust, mercifully. I mean, that's coming. But in this type of commentary, this can lead to criminal charges against you. And Zaev is more than willing to do this, as he fired that Mia founder last, what was it, discussed last podcast, and other people from Zaev's orbit are lining up to say, okay, I will not speak ill of Bulgaria anymore. So he's literally going to use criminal charges, the courts and the prosecutors to go after people who criticize Bulgaria online.
And this,
Yeah.
no, and I think let's just stop and dwell on that for a moment, because this is important, especially for me as an American who very much believes in free speech, because it is part of our Constitution. So Zaev wants to go after private individuals for using private speech. Now, granted, on a public, well, actually, it's a private forum, Facebook, Twitter, etc. Those are all private companies. But it's out there for everybody to see. But essentially, he wants to go after private individuals for speaking ill of Bulgaria. Now, I guess the question becomes then, well, first of all, who gets to determine what is hate speech? And this is always the problem with governments around the world whenever they want to start cracking down on quote-unquote hate speech. Who gets to determine, number one, what is hate speech? And why do they get to determine it? And then what is the punishment for it? That's number one. Number two, on the flip side, again, I think we discussed this in the last podcast, can speech be hurtful and hateful? Well, of course, absolutely. But for adults, there is no right that I can find anywhere on the planet. There is no right not to be offended. That is part of being an adult. That is part of being alive. That is part of growing up, is that people are going to say things that hurt your feelings. And if you can't deal with it as an adult, you do not deserve to be able to function in polite society. It's like, a quick aside here, Douglas Murray, the British author and historian, I was listening to a podcast with him last night. Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist from Canada, who is a worldwide phenomena for talking about things like hate speech, has a new book coming out. I think it's being published by Penguin, and the people that work for Penguin Books, a lot of the youngsters and the woke millennials, etc., had a public forum where some of them were literally crying that a book that their company was going to publish another book by Jordan Peterson because they think he's a hurtful, hateful man. And Douglas Murray's point was that all of those people, those that work for Penguin, that were literally crying, should be fired, and their jobs should be posted online. And the next day, young people who actually are adults and who can deal with this kind of stuff are then hired, and they replace these literal crybabies. So again, going back to the hate speech thing, who gets to determine it? Why do they get to determine it? Why do you want to give the government that kind of power to determine and regulate speech? Now, again, I know that Europeans in general aren't as keen as we Americans are with speech in general, and that it's more likely to be. Norway just implemented criminal penalties for private individuals dissing trans people. So but then again, Norway produced Quisling.
Yeah.
So,
literally the guy himself.
So, but again, this whole idea, and hopefully, Cvetin, I would hope that enough people there in Macedonia and the courts, etc., and responsible media and adults would say this is ridiculous. You're not going to crack down on free speech. If people want to burn the Bulgarian flag and call the Bulgarians fascists and other things, that is certainly their right to do it. And the best, again, and this is the other thing, the best antidote to hate speech, because there are people out there, and we see it on Twitter because we're both on there, and Twitter's a sewer. People saying vile, horrible things all the time. The best antidote to speech like that is more speech, is free speech, condemning that. And then sorry, I'm kind of on a rant here. The idea of Zaev, the idea of Zaev, cracking down on private individuals for so-called hate speech. Again, where is the line? Where is the line between me saying or you saying Bulgaria, aligned with Germany, and by and large was a fascist country. Not all the people, as you said, were fascists, of course, but the government certainly was, and they're culpable. Uh, where's the line between that and then actually, using horrible negative words to describe the Bulgarians, etc. So, but anyway, we will see where that goes.
Well, where
Into
it
Brant.
did go, it was there was a tremendous outrage online in the country. Like first thing I realized was somebody on Twitter said, "It's going to be another long day for the government's PR guys," and still had no idea what happened. And then I watched the interview and I was like, "Oh, yeah." And okay, I mean, you expect that on the right, on the opposition side, is going to be outrage, although we are not as invested, obviously, in this Yugoslav liberation struggle, because much of the victims of this post-war persecution were actually on the right.
Right.
Bulgarians obviously now claim they were all Bulgarians, but in fact, actually there was, there was one ridiculous moment where the journalist tells Zaev, okay, they were discussing the Bulgarian victims of Yugoslavia, and he says, at least, can you condemn Yugoslavia for Lazar Moisov, for, the communist era officials who were prosecutors who were hounding Macedonians who fought for Macedonian independence from Yugoslavia, not necessarily trying to bring the country to Bulgaria, just wanted to split out of Serbian rule. And Zaev obviously had no idea who Lazar Moisov was, this person, this prosecutor, and then Yugoslav diplomat. And he, it was glorious. Now the Bulgarian guy says, at least, okay, you don't have to, completely grovel in front of me for Bulgaria's sake. At least stand up for your own country and condemn Yugoslavia. And he was completely oblivious. But on the left, I just went through the timeline of the people from the Colored Revolution, and it was horrific. It was, shut up, you idiot. Stop talking. Who lets this guy get in front of a mic? It was horrendous. Practically a significant chunk of the party. I mean, this was initially the social media response.
Right.
By the evening and the next day, a significant chunk of the party is in open revolt against Zaev. It's led by Branko Crvenkovski, who was obviously practically the founder of SDSM and party leader, its first party leader, and prime minister and president then. He was immediately joined by two people who were supposed to lead the party instead of Zaev, Andrei Petrov and Zoran Zaev. President Pendarovsky made a statement very critical of Zaev, because Zaev practically, at one point, the Bulgarians hate Pendarovsky because he said once that, yeah, sure, Goca Delchev declared that he was a Bulgarian, the legendary Vimera hero. And then days later, and Bulgaria said, great, we have the president of Macedonia on tape saying this. And then a few days later, he likened this to a Macedonian now applying for a Bulgarian passport so he can go travel abroad. He said, well, yeah, he only did it because, he didn't believe in it. He only did it because he wanted to enroll in the military academy in Sofia. And the Bulgarians were livid. They were so angry about this. Because, they are always fear that Zaev and Pendarovsky will not be sincere. They will make concessions, but then they will play them down the line, which, given everything we know about Zaev, is perfectly reasonable on their part. This is why they now want it in writing. So Pendarovsky, and so Zaev said, yeah, well, listen, Pendarovsky is not as experienced a politician as Zoran Zaev, as me, which is really, Pendarovsky is so vain. He was advisor to Trajkovsky and Crvenkovsky. He prides himself of being, this gray eminence in politics. It was, and Zaev, this moron, says, yeah, he's inexperienced. He doesn't know what he's talking about. So Pendarovsky issued a statement, no historic revisionism, and I, in my 20 years of time in politics, so Pendarovsky is now lining up against Zaev.
Well, Oliver Spasovsky, I understand, the interior minister who normally aligns with Zaev, but he's from Kumanovo.
But the Kumanovo branch is pro-Serbian, that's why they don't like the Bulgarians.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
This is very Byzantine, isn't it?
Yeah. Ilinka Mitreva, former foreign
Oh,
minister,
yes, yes.
she lined up. So they're all calling for, I mean, these are calling for Zaev to resign. Well,
Hmm.
Spasovsky signed on to a statement the government issued, the party issued in response to Crvenkovsky, saying that Zaev is brave to, break new ground in reconciliation with Bulgaria and blah, blah, blah. Zaev made a few statements which even the party clarified as he's clarifying and adding, explaining what he meant to say, which is not a good look.
Hmm.
So Crvenkovsky calls for his resignation. Some in the party signed on to the party statement saying that Zaev is in the right, but then, like Spasovsky, gave a counter statement. And a big chunk, practically this urban Skopje wing, is opposed to Zaev, while Shekirinska still stands by him.
Hmm.
So she is the main of the known non-lieutenants, non-cronies of Zaev. She's the only person who has some kind of individual standing, who still stands by him, and two former prime ministers stand by him,
Oh,
Lyubcho
Buchko.
Georgievsky and Buchkovsky.
Yeah.
But they don't help him much. They have zero
They're nobodies.
basis. Yeah,
And they've both been
they're
accused of various crimes in the past, so that lessens their influence as well.
yeah. Georgievsky sought Bulgarian citizenship to avoid literally persecution from SDSM from Cervenkovsky.
Right.
So now they're not joining the protests. VMRO is holding protests. Hundreds of people, up to 1,000 people, or hundreds of cars would, if it's a drive-through protest. They're blockading the government and the foreign ministry now. Before that, they would gather in front of the government or in different cities as well. So at this point, the people from, and now VMRO is adopting the language of the partisan struggle, anti-fascist movement,
Hmm.
even quoting some communist era people, which I don't particularly like. Uh, it's not bringing the people of, who would subscribe to this worldview to the streets,
Hmm.
but it's an obvious play toward them that next election we have, remember this. And also, VMRO announced that they're going to hold a vote of no confidence on the government. VMRO has solidified the Albanian opposition on their side. They had an initial spat with Levica, who has 2 votes in parliament, but that's being glossed over. So now it remains to be seen whether this Crvenkovsky-led wing, if not in terms of street protests, if it can deliver votes in the parliament, because it only takes 2 people to, or actually one, yeah, two people to break from the government, and the government falls. And the Liberal Democratic Party announced it demands a meeting with Zaev to clarify what he said. The Democratic, so there are like 3 members of parliament, 1 member of parliament in
That's
Pavle Trajanov's party, 1 member in Liliana Popovska party. They are both angry, but still not sure if they intend to do anything about it. So, Zaev has a lot of small coalition members, and yeah, there could be a vote of no confidence next week.
well, that is something that bears watching. It would be, in my opinion, uh, quite an event if a couple of his members broke off and brought down
Mm.
the government.
Yeah.
Barring that, assuming that he can manage to barely survive, I think the protests will continue. Looks like the negotiations with the EU are on hold for now.
Mm.
Well, there aren't going to be any for now, but Zaev is going to continue uh, negotiating, quote unquote, with Bulgaria. There's word out there that Osmani and Dimitrov are conducting their own backdoor negotiations with Bulgaria. But we don't know for sure because they won't come to the Foreign Affairs Committee and answer the bloody questions.
Yep.
So who knows? And this goes back to things we've talked about many times, and frankly, it goes back to what to drag in the U.S. Embassy and others, who praise the government of Zoran Zaev. It ain't open and transparent, that's for sure. and yet
Yeah.
they like to claim to be. So if they're open and transparent, then they should tell the Macedonian people and the world what they're doing. Even if, let's just say that Zaev agreed to, as you said earlier, completely give away the farm and come up with a new treaty with Bulgaria. He would have to ram that through Parliament. I don't know if that would require a 2/3 vote or not. And then you've got, in between all that, you've got Christmas, New Year's, etc., and all these other things going on at the same time. So, but that's where we were 2 years ago, as I recall.
Yeah, yeah. Bulgaria is going to want something very, cast in stone this time because they don't trust Zaev. I mean, listen.
On that, they're correct.
Yeah, and the treaty says that we're supposed to rewrite our history books.
Yeah.
Zaev just didn't do it. They're now, a lot of the demands are just, something that Zaev already signed on to, but now they demand strict implementation of this.
Right.
They have, looking into the treaty, it is there. It's not like out of the blue. And when Karakachanov mocked them, they said, "Listen, you signed this. You look at the treaty." And when he was mocking Zaev, that he's like any other Bulgarian practically. The statement was, the Bulgarian's mind, he only
runs a day
comes
late.
smart. Yeah, it was like he realizes what he should have done a day late, the next day.
Yeah.
And he said that's with the Bulgarians, and so is with Zaev, practically saying Zaev is a Bulgarian and not so smart. And he said if you were implementing this for the past 3 years, bit by bit, you would not have had this big problem now. So, it is in the treaty. I mean, we were looking anxiously for signs of implementation of both treaties, like watching what children are taught at school, and things are pretty much, teachers are, resentful. They keep saying Macedonia. They're not trying to teach the children to use the North Macedonia or anything else. But, we were careful that something like this would happen, and it is in the treaty. And now Bulgarians say, okay, look into the treaty and implement it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that, as you just mentioned on the so-called Prespa agreement, this is something for another podcast down the road. We'll have to look at, what has and has not been done according to quote the Prespa agreement from both sides. Of course, I'm still of the opinion that what has been done can be undone and should be undone at some point and will be undone at some point. But that's a whole other podcast for another time. You mentioned that earlier that Zaev is giving away the farm. And I kept this in the back of my mind as we were continuing here. The farm that he is not giving away, of course, is his cannabis farms and the cannabis farms of his family, which brings up the issue. And I don't know if it's rumor or true or what. It's very hard, again, with this prime minister and this government because there's no openness or transparency. But, what are the business connections between the Zaev mafia and Bulgaria and the Bulgarian mafia? That go into all of these negotiations, etc. Is he so desperate to sign away Macedonia's, to give away Macedonia's identity and language and heroes and culture and history and everything else because of filthy lucre, basically, because he's got business interests in Bulgaria. There are plenty of rumors out there. It's hard to know what is true and what is not. It's certainly worth looking into. What do you know?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the deal, and Bulgaria officially said that one of the reasons we're blocking you is that you still haven't built the railroad to Bulgaria, which is, good point, and you're keeping practically the country linked only to Serbia and Greece for international commerce, and this is outside of the historic and national identity issues. Mm-hmm. And the next item is that you're blocking Bulgarian investment in Macedonia. Now, it was reported a while back that Zaev is registering companies, his family members are registering companies in the aforementioned town of Petrich, and that these companies are going to be logistics, digging, stuff like that, and that they're planning to grab contracts once the large copper mine of Ilovice is built, which is a major Canadian investment which Nikola Gruevski courted, and the guys came to us, examined a lot of real estate, found the best concentration of copper and gold in the region, and they said we're gonna invest like €500 million in just opening the mine, just digging the roads and the infrastructure, and then
Mines are expensive.
Yeah,
I know. I live in a mining state, so
yeah. The deal was going to be like they pay very little in concessions, as I remember, but just the jobs and the building of the thing is, cracking open the hillside. It's going to be like a major infrastructure job for the entire country. So the Colored Revolution protested against this horribly. They insisted that Gruevski wants to poison us here in the fertile valley of Strumica, blah, blah, blah. Even though this was going to be the most modern mine in Macedonia, compared to the stuff we have operating right now, it would have been much better, obviously. And the contract was revoked. Now the company is obviously suing the country, and they stand to win back everything they invested and some share of possible revenue, and they're going to bankrupt the country if they win, and they're going to win. So one idea is that Zaev is going to allow the project to go ahead, and is going to insist that his relatives are the ones in charge of the actual digging and strip mining, etc., which is again another fun, thing that we can rub in the faces of the Colored Revolution people when it happens.
especially the environmentalists.
Yeah. Then the Bulgarians are allegedly, according to many reports, interested in buying a major bank in Macedonia. The Greeks have one, Stopanska Bank,
Right.
and they have a lot of influence over Komercijalna Bank. So these are the two biggest banks in the country. So now it's expected that Bulgarians want to buy either one of these, like let's say Komercijalna, or something slightly smaller, but possibly together with the post office, which is now destroyed after the Euro Standard Bank collapse, which is bringing down the entire post office of the country. And Zaev is happy to offer the sale of the entire post office, all of its branches, plus the railway of the country, plus like half a dozen of commercial companies which either have valuable real estate, or there is a prominent energy plant which could be sold to the Bulgarians to be converted into a gas plant. So a lot of things are on sale, and apparently Bulgarian interests and Zaev's interests are going to go toward a major bank, a major mine, and some state monopoly like the post office to boot.
So, gosh, I don't know if we should title this podcast. Is it the end of Zaev, or is it Macedonia for sale? So either one is possible. Depends on who wins in this. Obviously, I hope Macedonia wins.